Okay, so the clock has struck 8 p.m. and I believe it's time for season 3. Um, Hopefully everything's working tonight. I'll wait to see. We got one viewer at the moment. Obviously, as per usual, I'll wait for about 10 minutes before we start, just to let people get on the stream and join in. And also just to do some troubleshooting, just to make sure that my volume is all good. You know, if I was professional, I'd probably do the thing where it's like you can prime a stream to start by like setting it up, as opposed to just immediately starting the stream and having people click at it once you've started. But I'm a bit too lazy to do that. Besides, I feel like I don't have a big enough audience to warrant posting my stream up, 2 hours beforehand and just switching over to it. Maybe I'll do that for the next week's one. However, this week, wouldn't mind some opinions of people. I've got ultra low latency on today, so hopefully I won't. Hopefully, you guys, when you say something in the chat, I'll be able to respond to it instantly, and not have this issue whereabouts you guys send me a comment, and by that point I'm minutes past talking about that thing and stuff. So hopefully, with the lower latency today, it should be hopefully a little bit better. I also noticed there was an issue with last time where I accidentally didn't didn't update the live stream details properly, so it still appeared that it was season 1. I had put in the new thumbnail and the new title, but obviously the changes hadn't been saved, and you are not meant to see that. And the changes hadn't been saved, so it just appeared like I was doing season 1 live stream again. So hopefully this time I've fixed that, and we now have the season 3 thumbnail showing, so people realise this is the continuing. I'm not redoing the old video again. Perhaps people who've just gone to the stream could tell me if they've two things I'm curious. I've got ultra low latency, so is the stream appearing clear on your screen, or is it really blurry? I would like to know about that. And 2, did you guys see the thumbnail, and did it say, this is season 3, and it had, the picture of all the modern prime ministers? That would be nice if you guys could tell me if that is happening. I also do apologise for my computer fan. I didn't think I'm pushing my computer too hard, but it's probably Chrome, which is causing my computer to overwork. So as a result, we unfortunately have the situation where my computer's fans might be going off a bit throughout this live stream, causing some annoying noise problems. Oh dear. So just a reminder, this will be only part 1. So I will only be going up to 1996 tonight. For the rest of the videos and season 3 and 2019 election, that will be next Sunday. I'll talk a bit more about the 2019 election. Still unsure if I'm going to make the deadline. I do apologise for those of you who are really keen on seeing it, but it's not quite coming together the way I want it at the moment. It's having a few problems. I'm hoping that I should have those problems sorted out, and we can hopefully go. Alright, so the time has just gone 8:05, so we should be 5 minutes away from starting. Haven't seen anyone in the chat yet, so I presume the current viewers I've got at the moment are the shy ones that don't comment. That's alright, you don't have to comment. Yeah. It's always a bit difficult trying to figure out how you can just keep talking for 10 minutes straight when no one's when there's no one talking back to you. Maybe I need to also do these streams with a friend or someone. But the reality is, basically, I run this whole channel by myself. There's not really anyone else that really works on my channel for me, unlike all those big YouTubers that have, producers and stuff. All these videos are homemade, as would probably be pretty obvious by the quality level. One advantage of doing the season 3 election videos is these ones are obviously a lot more recent. As we can see, this one was only made in May, the 18th of May, which, seeing that, I'm like, geez Louise, season 3 has taken me over a year to do. I did not realise I had taken so long to do this season. Like, it just shows that my effort in finishing. Wow, oh my gosh, I have not realised it's been over a year and I still haven't finished season 3. Wow, that's shame on me. I really should have finished months ago. And the fact that I'm still here, can't finish one video with the 2019 election, is a bit of a shame on me. But again, these videos are obviously a little bit longer than the especially these last few ones have been quite long, and I've also been trying to really push my other channel as well, which is one of the reasons why these videos take a bit of time to get done. Okay, so about 3 minutes from starting up the first video. I'm not sure how far, since we got less videos to cover this time, I'm not sure if you guys want me to just pause between episodes and talk, or if you guys want me to try to do last time, which is just play through all the videos in a rush. Because I acknowledge that last time, I really felt like I rushed through the last few episodes. I didn't really have enough time to talk about them because I was kind of keen to, I had to leave, so that was a bit unfortunate. So hopefully with the slower pace this time, I can actually spend more time talking about these videos. And I really should talk about these videos because these are arguably the best videos that I've made. And we're definitely going to see some of my favorite videos this election. I would say 1987 is probably my favorite election I ever covered. I thought that election, it's the one I usually show my friends because I think it's the funniest one. There's also a bunch of other good ones in this episode coming up. So it looks like we've got about 7 viewers at the moment, which hopefully that should be good. Again, feel free to leave anything in the chat if you want me to answer anything about these episodes. Although I'm worried a lot of you guys have been asking very generalistic questions over the last 2 live streams, and now you guys don't have anything to ask about if you've had all your questions answered. Maybe I just need to stream a video game when I start my stream. That'll get a few people to watch, and then I'll switch over to politics and everyone will leave. Alright, we've just got 1 minute left and then we'll start. And then hopefully more people will start showing up once I start the thing. Here we go. John Mezzo, good to see you. Yep, so I'll be covering all the elections up to 1996. And hello to you too, D-Gaming. So yeah, I'll be covering up all the elections up to 1996, and I was just asking whether or not you guys want me to pause after each election video or just play through them like there's no tomorrow. I'll leave that up to you guys to answer because we are almost about to start. It's currently 8:09. It'll be... Harry's on. Good to see you too, Harry. And it's 8:10, so we're about to start now. So here we go with the first of the season 3s, the election of 1977.
And so we reach the home stretch, the part of the story most Australians are familiar with. With the chaos of the 70s coming to a close, Australia had settled down to the 2-party system, with the Labor Party on the left and the Liberal NC coalition on the right.
Now, when it comes to season 3, I used to think, yeah, when it comes to season 3, I always thought I had the good microphone set up yet, the one I'm using right now, which is a nice Rode. But unfortunately, I think the first 3 episodes of season 3 are actually recorded with my older mic, which isn't as good.
We will see how Australia goes through 5 prime ministers in 5 years, combined with the rise of fringe parties and the deterioration.
I don't know what
of
happened with
trust in
the
government. So let's begin the last leg of the journey
with the
to Australian
party
politics,
logos. They look a bit
the
bad.
election of 1977.
So yeah, this is the first of the alleged videos to have my cousin James Finlay do the, or cousin-in-law James Finlay do the openings as opposed to myself, which did have a few issues which I'll talk about later on, but surprisingly he did a
Shout
really
out to my
good
cousin
job.
James Finlay for that brand new opening. You can check out his channel in the description below. Despite
So I
the
would
chaos
acknowledge that
caused by the
James is not a
1975
channel that's probably
constitutional
up
crisis
people's cup of
subsequent
tea.
election, things began to settle down in Australia.
John Mez, I basically, I think I said this last time, I keep the audio quiet so I can talk, but I can turn it up a bit if you want it a bit louder. Generally, I only want you guys to listen to the audio when I'm not talking.
However, he would keep Labor's Medibank insurance.
Do you think Gough should have resigned as leader after the slaughter of 75? Yeah, I think he should have. I think Bill Hayden should have taken over straight away, because despite the fact that it's really a party and not a leader, a new leader always seems to be a new face of the party. Just look at the Liberals in the last few years, where they've been basically the same party, but the public perception is they've changed. Public perception is they're a new party just because they've got a new leader. Yeah, Doug Anthony only passed away very recently. I think some of you guys might have seen that. It's interesting. We got people passing away now, mid election videos now. So people who were actually alive when I started the series, but are no longer alive now. I think another one obviously is Andrew Peacock, who will be coming soon.
He would also oversee a large number of non-white immigrants arriving in Australia, including both Vietnamese.
Fraser was definitely a very
to account for the large number of
small L
non-white immigrants
liberal
arriving in Australia,
prime minister,
Fraser
isn't
portrayed
he?
the Australian
You know, sort of
leadership in multicultural
very
affairs,
conservative
which helps
economic,
these immigrants
but
into Australia,
you know, very liberal, like, you know, with he was very pro immigrants and stuff,
As the election came
which I know is
around,
why he
things seemed to
basically
be
got
going
very
smoothly. The
angry
biggest
with
mishap
his
was the fall of the Fraser government,
with his
coming
party,
back in
especially under Abbott.
1977, when it was revealed that Treasurer and Deputy Liberal leader Philip Lynch was using his family trust to avoid paying taxes. This forced him
Fortunately, I
to
still,
resign as treasurer
still
and be
couldn't
replaced by
couldn't
Howard.
properly find pure colour footage at this point, so I still had a lot of black and white
Meanwhile,
images.
on the other side of Parliament, Gough Whitlam continued to lead the Labor Party despite its crushing defeat in 1975.
Yeah, so
Whitlam
I don't think he should have
originally
stayed
planned to
a
give the
prime
Labour
minister.
leader over to his former treasurer Bill Hayden, who at the time was the only Labor member from
Yeah,
Queensland.
I guess you're right. Well,
However,
Fraser wasn't even
Hayden
that
declined
conservative
to
economic,
fulfill
although he was
his task.
more conservative than, say,
Hayden
Whitlam.
would
Like,
later
he was
change his
he did
mind.
still push
However, by this
austerity
point, Labour
to
had
solve the
secured
energy
Labour
crisis as
vote
opposed
for the
to
next election. Despite
monetary
no longer
theory.
being in government, Whitlam was still being haunted by the aftermath of his time as Prime Minister. In
Oh yeah, I remember
1976, another
he
finance
famously endorsed Sarah
controversy
Hanson Young in
exploded,
2013. Yeah, I remember
that
seeing a
Labour
video
had
of him and
sought
Sarah
finance from
Hanson
another source, this time from Iraq.
talking, like doing like some
But it would
a present, it's like a stage talk with each other. It's interesting he endorsed Sarah Hanson because he's not South Australian. Sarah Hanson's a South Australian senator. It's interesting.
With his wife quoting, "Did the earth move for you too, dear?"
Oh great! I put on a terrible old lady voice.
himself. Labour would not be the only party Fraser would have to deal with this time around. In March 1977,
Here they
Victorian
come.
Liberal MP
Here comes the
Don Sheep
Democrats.
resigned from the party, accusing both sides
It's
of
funny, every time I
corruption
mention the
and
Democrats, people are like, why are you talking about American
Meanwhile,
politics?
at
I'm
the
like,
same
no, the
time,
Australian
Australian
Democrats. And
Party
they're
and
like,
the new Liberal
what's the
movement,
Australian
which were combined
Democrats?
parties, would join forces to create the Australian Democrats. Chip would be invited to join this party and would immediately...
Yeah, so we'll cover
Despite the election
we'll
not being true
cover
until the middle of
Fraser leaving the Liberal
1978,
Party in
Fraser
when
called the election early
when we
and
get to the
set the date
2010
for 10th
election
December
next week.
1977. Fraser claimed this was being done to make sure the Senate and House election calendars would fall in sync. However, others believed it was due to a pessimistic economic outlook for 1978, which would hurt the coalition's election promises. So Fraser, still with the weight of Lynch's scandal, would face off with Whitlam for a second
Do you
time.
think they got the
As the
inspiration
campaign
for the
developed,
name
Labour
after the
began to
American
gain
Party?
momentum with what they saw as a return to form for Whitlam.
No, I wouldn't
Going
say
back to
so.
his talking
I would probably
points
say
to one
they
government back in 1972.
it's from the word
Meanwhile,
democratic,
the
which
Democrats
means,
started
you
to
know,
draw large amounts of supporters, the likes of
by
that not
popular
being seen
vote.
as an independent third party
That's
since the
so
year
basically he
2000
wants to be the party
1974.
that represents
This election
the
was
democratic
surprisingly
process,
seats,
hence the Democrats.
down to
Same
about
reason how the
54.
Democrats got their
This was done
name,
so that the lower
being
house
a
would not hold
populist
more than
party.
twice the number of Senate seats. In the case another joint sitting was held. And the winner
I wonder if
was
it's interesting that we've never had a joint
Don
sitting.
Dunstan and Labour with 27 seats.
Oh, that's
became
right.
fourth. Wait.
Thanks to oh yeah.
Oh, sorry, wrong election.
Had to put
Despite
it-
Whitlam's
So
supposed
if people wondering why I
return,
made that
Fraser
joke
was soundly
about
winning 86 seats. with a loss of 5
about
seats.
the Don Dunstan election is because when I was Google searching this election, I accidentally got sent to the SA election, and I was like, "What?" And so I thought, "I'll add my confusion into the video as a joke."
Would resign shortly after this election. The man who had witnessed the demise of 4 Liberal leaders and had revolutionised the Labour Party would see this election as the final nail in the coffin of his
Kind of crazy to
leadership.
remember this guy got
Last
like,
would step down
was
as Labour
elected
leader
deputy
after
leader in
the
like
Liberal Party was just shy
1961
of
and had been like a major.
years.
He'd been a major
Longest
figure
decade
in
Labour
the Labour Party for 20 years,
Despite
and
not winning any
you know
seats in
anything
the
about the
lower
Labour
house,
Party is their
Democrats
figures don't
only
tend to
won 2
be
seats in the Senate,
as
with
relevant
John
for as long.
Victoria and Colin
Like,
Marsden
I guess,
in New South Wales. They would also
Paul
score roughly
Keating
10%
was
of the
sort
vote in
of
both
relevant for
houses.
about a decade, for about
Despite
2
this,
decades.
The coalition would still hold its Senate majority from 1975. and
But
thus
yeah,
would
Labour
give
leaders tend to
Australia
come and go
its
much
rest
quicker
in the
than Liberal
70s.
leaders.
Despite the election being quite uneventful,
And he
this
lived until
election
98
also
years
saw
old.
referendums
Yes,
and the conduction of a plebiscite
Gough
on the
Whitlam is, I
national
believe, the
anthem.
longest
Three of these
living
referendums
Prime
would be
Minister in
carried,
retirement.
which
He
included
was
a change to Senate
he was
vacancies
he was
to
a
prevent repeat
ex-Prime
of the
Minister for I
Peterson
think
stunt in 1975.
40 years or something
This is the
ridiculous.
last time
I know,
an Australian
quite
federal
40 years, but
referendum has been
it
successful.
was like 1975.
Well, that election over, we move into another decade.
Yeah,
as
it was about
come back next
39
time,
years he
election
was in retirement for.
Ah, the 80s. To some, the greatest decade in history. I wouldn't know, I wasn't born yet. As
My parents
Australia
laughed at that
approached the new
line.
Decade, Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser would be smooth sailing. with his
It's
home
funny when it
majority
gets like
in
that
both
footage is
houses
literally
of
just I
Senate,
just
along
Google
with
search
resignation
Melbourne
of his friend
1980 and I find a
rival,
tour
Gough Whitlam.
video, like a video of
this
trying to
election was
sell
not going to be as
Melbourne off
easy
to
as
tourists,
last
and I
time.
just use that footage to get some city shots. I'm curious to know what you guys think of the season 3 openings compared to my own season 2 openings. Fascinating how the Australian Democrats were able to do so well in the early elections with a small L Liberal Malcolm Fraser at the helm, who had taken their voting base. It's kind of interesting because Fraser was definitely sort of offering the middle ground. But I think it's, I don't know, I couldn't really say, like, possibly Fraser was still viewed as a conservative even by those days.
The United States under Jimmy Carter boycotted the 1980 Moscow Olympics.
Also, there were just people that just hated the two parties and kind of without any real reason. And I find that today, there are people that hate Labour and Liberal, yet would agree with most of their policies, but just think because they're a two big party, they must be bad.
Things were turning sour after a small recession in 1979.
Still sad that Australia uses first past the post. What are you talking about? Australia hasn't used first past the post since 1915.
Despite a global boycott, Labour would hound Fraser on this deal with one of Fraser's biggest critics.
John Meza, Bill Hayden was cool, would have been a good PM.
By exclaiming the deal had taken place.
I'm actually interested, like, I think a lot, I'm not sure, he's a bit of a dull figure, but that's interesting because I would also describe Anthony Albanese as a Bill Hayden-like figure. So if Anthony Albanese wins the next election and becomes Prime Minister, I think we get an interesting sort of look at what a Bill Hayden Prime Minister would have looked like in Anthony Albanese.
At 44, Hayden would be the youngest elected leader since Chris Watson in 1901.
Democrats got more support from Liberal voters that cared about the environment. Fraser didn't that much. Yeah, again, like I think Fraser had a decent environmental policy, but again, the Democrats would have just won that support anyway because people just wouldn't trust the Liberals on environmental stuff.
He'd become much more moderate in his ideology.
Yeah, but it's nearer to first past the post and proportional representation. Oh wait, DK, are you that guy that I had that argument with in the comment war the other day?
Representative in Queensland, and his ascension to leader was seen as some
because like it's
voters in the Sunshine State.
It's not first past the post because it's the idea of one man per one electorate.
At a media conference
but it's not first past the post. It's proportional representation, which means basically the winner, the person that wins the seats, the person that not only wins the most votes themselves, but also wins the most votes from people's second and third preferences.
Fraser would call the election for the 18th of October 1980. However, his re-election prospects were not looking good.
Do you think the New Liberal Party will have any impact on the next election? I'm not sure what New Liberal Party you're referring to. His budget in 1975 was universally praised, and he was about to take the Whitlam government in a better direction as Treasurer, was a good foreign minister as well. Yeah, I can imagine that. Like, Labour Treasurers are pretty good in my opinion. The problem is they're just, a lot of Labour figures are really good politicians, but they're just not very popular figures. They're just too bigger
transfer
workaholics.
in
That's one of the problems. They just too
Others
much.
was Bob Hawke, the president of
They
the
do too much.
Council
Like
of Trade
they're
Unions.
too busy
Hawke
working in
lobbied
government and
aggressively
doing
at the
stuff,
Federal Parliament
and not
after
working on
voting
like being
Oreo
likable and
in
presentable,
1963.
which
However,
sucks
he had
because
turned down
arguably they
voting
should be
until
better
now.
at being
Leaving his job
working
as
politicians than they should
president
be at being
behind,
just
Hawke would run for the
likable
existing
figures.
Melbourne
But
City
unfortunately,
And
democracy
there was
favours likable
Malcolm
figures.
Fraser and the coalition, but with a loss of 12 seats, Fraser's supermajority was halved.
Yeah, but D-gaming,
Last year, he'd
but it still
only
leads to
won
Labour and the
2
coalition
by
being
less than 1%.
predominant.
This result also meant the Liberals
The fact
no
is,
longer held
if the reason why it's so
majority
this
and would
system
now
is
require
good, it
50
allows you to
support
vote
pass
for other
legislation.
parties if you don't like the
final
main
loss of Fraser
parties,
would be the Senate majority,
without
whereas the
risking
three
the
seats the
party you
Australian
really
delegates
don't like
gave the
winning.
third
So
party
people can
developed
just vote for the
power, so it
Greens.
holds for the
So if the
next
Greens
4
became a better
years.
party,
Despite the
there's
loss of
no
absolute
risk
power
in
Parliament,
Labour
Fraser
voters
had
voting
quite
for the
comfortably won
Greens.
re-election.
They just
Hayden,
don't, because
who
I don't
only
think the
picked up
Greens
13
have
seats
a
of
wide enough
51, had
message.
come quite short of winning a majority, despite the two-party preferred results. Despite regaining a lot of Labour's lost ground,
Jim
Hayden
Carnes was
boxing
the opposite. Pretty likable as an
which led
anti-war
some
figure,
to
rose up to
opposition.
threshold, was a terrible one.
Despite originally
Yeah, I can
campaigning
imagine
for
that.
Hayden
I can
Prime
imagine that.
Minister,
I'm actually curious to know what you guys think of
Bob
people
Hawke
like
was
Bob
actually trying to
Hawke,
become
because
the
I
leader
actually see
himself.
Bob Hawke as just a
Fun
very
fact,
likable figure,
Hayden
but not a very
recording
good
this video, Bill
politician.
Hayden is still alive at the age of 87,
I'm just
making him the oldest
curious.
surviving leader of a
Let me
major
see.
party. If we ignore Doug Anthony, who was also alive at the
I think I would have.
90. Hayden currently resides in the
Okay,
outskirts of Brisbane.
Bill Hayden's still
But he
alive.
made
Just double
headlines
checking,
2
because
years ago in
you can never be too sure if one of
2018
these
when he
old
got
politicians
baptised after
passes
being
away.
atheist for most of his life. Fraser might
Never
have
sure if
won
one of these
the
politicians
1980
passed
election
away
comfortably,
and
but the result
you
felt
missed the
anything
news.
but
Like,
comfortable.
I almost
With the
completely missed
government
Andrew
still delivering
Peacock's
budget
passing.
deficits, Fraser's chances of remaining Prime Minister
I
will continue
can't
to
remember
decline
who it
as we move
was
deep
that
into
picked
the
up. It's
80s,
like
and I come back
Cheeseburger
next time for the election
picked up
of
on the
1983.
passing of
Racing is often used as a metaphor
of Andrew
for
Peacock,
struggle.
like only like a few minutes after the news dropped. I was quite impressed with how he was able to find that news so
However,
fast.
it might be quite
No,
accurate
apologies
to
for the
call
helicopter.
1983 a race in which both sides of Parliament were moving as quickly as possible to position themselves to have the best chance of winning.
I believe this is the last election video with the dodgy mic. I did kind of ask my cousin to use the original music I had, but
Things were not
this was
looking too
alright.
good for Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser.
I like how he keeps suggesting the background music I put in.
Will continue to be pathetically low. The
Now, I think I
economic
forgot to
growth
put
is positive.
Living in the Land Down Under either in this one or the next one. I think I forgot to put that on, and I was like, oh, why did I not put that song in the video? It was an obvious choice.
Balance of power in the Senate. These restrictions on Fraser's ability to govern clashed with his inflexible governing style. Fraser's governing style had already seen several coalition ministers resign over disagreements. However, in April 1981, Fraser would have to deal with the resignation of Andrew Peacock.
Yeah, I tried to switch that image out with a better one, but for some reason the video editor wouldn't switch it out. That's why I got that terrible pixelated one of him. In fact, it was actually really hard to get a good photo of Andrew Peacock. For some reason, there was just no good photos of him.
Peacock would lose with only 27 votes to Fraser's 54. However, the results showed a sizable amount of disunity in the party.
It looks like,
Along
is
with
that
the
John
leadership
Gordon
team,
on the right? I
Fraser's
don't know why
deputy
John Gordon would
Lynch
be there.
forced to resign due to poor health. Lynch would be replaced by John Howard, the man who had previously taken over Lynch's role as treasurer. Lynch would tragically die only 2 years later in 1984. Meanwhile, the Labour Party was also struggling with leadership challenges. Hayden was seen as a dull leader.
I think that's a picture of Hayden as Governor General a bit later on. It was a nice photo of him. That's why I didn't really want to get like one of these older photos. See, it's all in black and white. I wanted nearly every photo. Every party leader needed to have a colour photo.
Despite the loss, Hawke continued to gain support in the Labour ranks, and it seemed only a matter of time before he took over. This led Fraser to consider the possibility of calling another early election.
That's alright, D-gaming.
Hawke became the leader of the Labour Party.
I didn't want to attack
Due
you or
to a back
anything.
injury, Fraser would be unable to call an election in 1982. However, he would get an early election prediction in the form of the 1982 Flinders by-election to replace Lynch.
I'm pretty sure Labour only ever won this election once, and this seat has basically been a safe Liberal seat ever since.
Meanwhile, in the Labour Party, the upset would be the final nail in the coffin for Hayden's leadership. By 1983, even Hayden's closest supporters believed that Hawke had the better shot at winning the upcoming election.
Now,
In January that year,
yeah, so what
70%
happened here is my microphone, for some reason, lost its power, and so it was only recording on, like, phantom power, and as a result, I had to massively amplify the voice here. That's why it sounds super weird. I didn't really want to record. I don't like re-recording my lines. So that's why that part sounds really weird. Yeah, my mic sort of partly died. But luckily on the bright side, this I believe was the last election I used the old mic, and I used the Rode mic in the next one, so my voice becomes a lot clearer.
Forced the Labour Party to run with the unpopular Hayden, thus ensuring his best chance of winning.
Wonder how Fraser hurt his back.
Around midday, he was unable to talk to the Governor General.
Yeah, I don't actually know
him having lunch with a Polish
how he injured his back. I didn't look into that part.
Announced his resignation, and Hawke was elected.
Yeah, Greg Hunt is currently the MP for Flinders. I think you mean Greg Hunt is the current MP for Flinders. I'm joking.
Fraser would announce the election.
I wonder how many people got that joke.
1983 at 5 p.m. But by this point, it was too late, and he would now be facing the popular Bob Hawke for the top job. Robert James Lee Hawke was arguably the best candidate the Labour Party ever fielded.
I remember I put a little joke there, which I had to remove because it made no sense. I think it was like the got him joke or something, where I was going to have like Fraser calls the election, but instead of facing Hayden, he faces Hawke, and it's like Hawke, haha, got him. But yeah, it didn't work, so I had to remove that joke.
Which was an excellent position to hold, as it gave Hawke governing experience while shooting him from the Whitlam's government's controversies. Hawke would campaign on bringing Australia together with promises to improve Medicare, increase unemployment benefits and pensions.
I believe I found
tax cuts for low-income earners.
It was kind of difficult to find footage for some of these elections. Like even important elections like 83, which are big elections, footage is kind of hard to find. Unfortunately, you Google search a lot of these elections and get sent straight to US politics, unfortunately.
And the winner was Bob Hawke and Labour with 75
I had a debate with a libertarian who tried to look like an intellectual by not being able to cite sources correctly. He actually cited... Interesting.
Labour had also increased their Senate majority to 30.
See, I'm not the best at citing, like, that's why I literally tell you in these videos, do not cite me. These are not professional videos. Do not use these in your political studies. You can use these to learn about it, but then I strongly recommend you go to, well, not Wikipedia, you go to actual sources to find the real information. This is entertainment, so do not use these videos that I make as factual. They are massively flawed. Hawke was a Bill Clinton before Bill Clinton. Yeah, but I don't think Hawke was quite as bad as Bill Clinton. Like, I'm still listening to
this was due to the Franklin Dam to build a large hydroelectric power
I'm still hearing stories about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton trying to do everything to attack their own party base, because there's nothing worse than Trump than a lefty.
Conservationists were concerned the impact the dam would have on a largely untouched ecosystems of southwest Tasmania.
To be fair, I'm German and this is the best way to learn about foreign politics. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate people from other countries watching my videos. Although, to be honest, your political system is a nightmare. I've tried to watch videos on your political system, but there's like tiers upon tiers upon tiers there.
And Tasmanian Liberal Premier Robin Gray, which would see the High Court get involved. The High Court would eventually side with Hawke and the federal government, giving them the power to protect heritage sites from state construction projects.
To be honest, as someone who's against centralisation, I always find myself having a bit of mixed reactions on this. Like,
Labour would perform terribly there in both federal and state.
Also, I'm not like as much as Greens are going to hate me. I wasn't entirely against the Franklin Dam project.
In 1983, Brown would soon be joined by several other environmentalists in the state parliament, and together they would form a new left-wing political party built around environmentalists. But that's a topic for a later video. Come back next time for the election of 1984.
Now, finding stuff on 1984 was difficult because obviously it's one of the most famous US elections.
For the 7th time in just over 10 years. I'm surprised Australians weren't getting sick of politics by this point. With Labour finally back in power again, would this election end up being another 1974, crippling them into another wipeout? Or would the Labour government
to get more than 5% get the proportional amount of the seats? Okay. Because I believe that mostly happens in Australia. Like, if you get at least 5% of the vote, you're pretty much guaranteed a Senate spot in at least one state. Bob Brown came out against wind power a few years ago because it kills birds. I'm sure he came out against wind power generally or just against wind power in a certain place. And in Canada as well as terms of the 19... Oh, was 1984 a big election in Canada too?
Hawke would be slow to enact reforms and would for the most part keep Fraser's pre-election agenda intact.
But this is only one chamber in Australia. Well, actually no, Australia's got two chambers. It's got a House and a Senate. And the Senate is proportionally elected.
Senior and junior, with the National Cabinet being made up exclusively of senior members. Hawke would also take a much more formal approach to his cabinet choice.
I actually would argue that Australia's got one of the best government systems in the world. I'm very defensive of the Australian government's electoral. There's a few things I feel like we can improve, like accountability to politicians when it comes to donations. But in terms of how elections are handled, I think we've got one of the best in the world.
He would also take on a very public role as Prime Minister, frequently appearing on TV to talk to the people. This allowed Hawke to gauge public opinion and push policy over
The kid with a no nuke sign tries to heckle the Prime Minister.
75% approval rating in 1974.
Scott Morrison couldn't get that high.
History. However,
Was it Mike McGowan that got to 90% at one point or something ridiculous?
Which the Prime Minister would overshadow the party when it came to talking about the government's accomplishments. A great example of Hawke's more public approach to governing came on the 27th of September, when Australia would win the American Cup yacht race. For 130
To be honest,
years,
this is such a
the New York
random
yacht
story
club
that I would
won
never have
YYC,
added
dominated the
if it wasn't
competition
for
against any challenges.
If it wasn't
However,
for Bob
in
Hawke's famous
1983,
line.
Under the leadership of Australian businessman Alan Bond,
Now, did he just pass
Australia
away
would
recently? I
challenge
can't
the
remember.
YYC with a special modified boat that almost got it disqualified. Australia would
So
make
might be going to
history
go to
by winning
89%.
the cup. This event made global headlines and was a cause of much celebration in Australia. Hawke would join in on the celebrations, where he would be asked if he thought the day should become a public
Nothing like wearing two
Hawke
suits
brushed
at
the answer
once.
off by simply saying,
I tell you what, any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up today is a bum.
Meanwhile, on the financial side of things, Hawke, along with his treasurer Paul Keating, would oversee the floating of the Australian dollar, ending the currency's reliance on the gold standard. This was one of the many economic reforms undertaken by Keating, who quickly worked his way up the Labour ranks.
You know, it's funny because as I was saying earlier, when a prime minister dies, the eulogy video is what I usually use to find footage. So I'm like, when Bob Hawke passed away, it was kind of a blessing in disguise because it meant there was a ton of eulogy footage that I could use for this video.
Previously, unions had become quite the destructive force by frequently striking for what industrial leaders believed were unfair work terms and wages.
As a pro-unionist, this line always makes me. I like unions, but I have to say what happened.
On how unions and industries could resolve disputes without the need for strikes. These discussions would end up taking several years to complete. However, in the meantime,
This was a debate
Hawke
later
forced
between the
immediately
two.
came back to the polls for another early
Whose
election.
idea was to float the
Due to
dollar?
Fraser's
Well, no, I
insistence
didn't.
on
Hawke and
early
Keating
elections,
argue over it.
The House and Senate calendars had again fallen out of sync, and thus to prevent a repeat of the 1960s election mess, Hawke would be forced to call an
My
election.
God,
on the 1st of
Menzies,
December
why did you do that?
1984. To date, this is the last time an election has occurred, only 1 year after the previous one.
I never find it crazy that we used to have elections occur quite regularly close together, but like recently every election's been 3 years apart.
Upon his resignation in 1966. As a member of the Liberals' left faction, Peacock had been a supporter of Billy Snedden, and thus did not get on well with the man who took Snedden
Oh,
down.
so they did argue over it.
Fraser. Throughout Fraser's time in office, Peacock would frequently...
I can't remember if they actually ended up forgiving each other for their misgrievances.
Eventually, upon Fraser's immediate resignation following the 1983 election, Peacock would beat out John Howard for the role of Liberal Party leader, who would soon be joined by Ian Sinclair, who had taken over as leader from...
Yes, I know, that's not
National
Ian
Party,
Sinclair. I
who
got the
now
wrong
officially got
photo. I
contact with
apologise.
his name.
I was having trouble finding a colour photo of Ian Sinclair.
There was little expectation that Peacock could win. However,
I'm never gonna live that one down.
Strong campaign against the young Hawke government. On the 26th of November, Australia would hold its first ever leaders debate.
Yeah, so I couldn't find footage of the actual debate, but I found this parody version of it. Unfortunately, annoying, this parody version wasn't even on YouTube, it was on some other site, so I had to use like OBS to just screen cap it, so that's why it was a bit dodgy. Because normally it's on YouTube and I have a YouTube downloading software, but if it's not on YouTube I can't use my downloading software.
48 seats, and the Senate up to its current 76 seats. This would be the largest increase to the seat
Every
count
state
since
has a
the
timed
1939
election date like the US, but not the federal government.
Bob Hawke and Labour with
No,
88
Tasmania
seats
can call
again
it. If
the
you
Senate.
remember, I had a
However,
Tasmanian
this
live stream a
gains
few
due
weeks
to
ago.
the seat
That's
count.
also
Labour
called
would
by the
actually
Premier,
lose their
not
total percent
set in
of
stone.
seats, now holding 55%.
I can't remember if
60.
Queensland also did it. I think Queensland also did it,
Dropped by 1.46%,
and then they
down to
changed it, but I'm not sure.
51.77. These results came as a shock to most pundits who had predicted Labour would have done better. Hawke blamed the underperforming results on voters confused with changes done to the Senate ballots, which he believed led some to incorrectly fill up voting tickets, resulting in their votes being invalidated. Another issue believed to have affected Labour's results was the Coombe affair. In 1983,
I hope I pronounced that one
Labour
right.
Party
It's not
secretary,
Coombe.
was accused by ACO of
Travelling
being a
in the
security
fried
risk
up Coombe.
due to his relationship with diplomat Valery Ivanov. Foreign Minister Bill Hayden...
Oh my goodness, what's it with the Russians again?
While Coombe would be denied access to the government despite being a lobbyist.
To be honest, when I mentioned Bill Hayden there, I was wondering how many people are going, "Oh, that's Bill Hayden! That's that opposition guy from the last episode."
Claiming that he was only trying to set up a trade deal. To some voters,
I confused it with Graham Richardson.
an organisation despised by most Labour supporters. Just see the 1954 election for why. Meanwhile, Peacock, despite not winning, had
Also,
picked up
Hawks
16
also
seats,
struggled
but lost
emotionally in this
66.
election.
Peacock
Like,
seemed
it's
pretty
like in the
optimistic
performance.
these results
You
would
mentioned it in the
improve things for
debate,
coalition's
but his
chances
daughter's
in the
heroin
next
addiction.
election,
Oh,
claiming
I did not know that.
Was as I felt it throughout the nation.
You know, one thing I do regret is not playing more of these snippets of people talking. I always feel like I should have done more of
with
it.
that, he would optimistically go into the new parliament.
I really should have watched some of the election coverages and see if there were famous interview lines.
Come back next time for the election of 1987. With the Labour Party
Here we go, my
popularity
favourite.
shot decline and a
I've watched this
resurgence of
episode like so many times because I love this video.
Two-term government. With a clear shot to government, what could stop the Liberals and Nationals winning the 1987 election? Knock knock, it's Queensland.
Yeah, this election is very funny. I love this election.
Despite the
Queensland
upset of the
man attempts
1984
to
election,
disrupt
Hawke would
politics.
continue to govern Australia with a strong majority government.
So, a fun fact about this election, I initially had You're the Voice as the background music, but most copyright claims just demonetize my videos, which is fine because I don't monetize my videos anyway. But John Farnham's legal agency took my video down. They wouldn't let me show it to you guys. So I had to remove it, and instead I found this longer version of Beds Are Burning, and I said use that for the entire video. So if you're curious, I did attempt to put You're the Voice as the background music to this, but John Farnham wouldn't let me apparently.
The coalition would experience some of the most vicious leadership tensions in the party's history. Despite outperforming the polls in the 1984
Oh, it's interesting. So your dad was going to vote Liberal and Joe was supposed to vote Labour. Because it's interesting about this election, which I'll get to when we get to the results. But it's some interesting stuff. It's the first time proof that Joe... Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks, John.
From Howard that he would not challenge him for the leadership role, Peacock would move to replace Howard as deputy.
The Liberal National Democrat is kind of like the German CDU/CSU dynamic. Yeah, I'd argue, I'm not sure how many other countries have anything quite like what we have in the coalition. Like, having these two parties that basically run as almost one party. Like, other places in the world have coalitions, but they sort of come and go, whereas here, the coalition has always been the same two parties.
Born in 1939,
It's interesting, even at the worst, like in Queensland, the Liberals never broke the coalition inside of Labour. Like, they literally kept the coalition till the bitter end almost.
to join the Liberal Party in 1957. Howard would take on multiple roles in the party, from helping campaigns...
Finding photos of young Howard was very difficult.
He would eventually enter Parliament himself in 1974, winning the seat of Bennelong.
And he's still had his pretty bad receding hairline.
In 1975, he was helping overthrowing Snedden and getting Fraser elected leader. This in turn would score him the role of
The
Minister for
CDU and the
Business
CSU also known as
in Fraser's
interesting.
government.
So they've been
Howard
like
was
a
promoted to treasurer 2 years later in the wake of...
so they've been basically a
scandals.
conservative
As treasurer,
coalition that's
Howard
lasted a
would
really long
push
time
for
and like will
economic
always sort of side with each
despite
other.
Fraser's support of
That's
Keynesian
interesting.
practices. By 1985,
I guess there's a similar case in the
Howard
UK with
as
like the
Conservative
Irish
faction.
parties.
He would begin to move the Liberal
I think it's like the
Party away from
Unionists
Fraser's
pretty much
economic
always side
agenda
with
towards a more
the
free
Tories to
market
form
one.
government.
But with the economy in yet another downturn, it seemed like Howard would have a strong shot at ending yet another short-lived Labour government. However, up north, a new crisis was booming.
The UK
Let's
Labour
talk about
Co-op
Queensland,
coalition in the UK is
Sunshine
kind of
State.
similar.
In 1949,
I don't know what that is.
Queensland
You'll have
Labour
to explain a bit
government
more,
under Ned Hanlon passed the electoral districts
Jack.
Act, which sought to give smaller regional towns a stronger say in government. Hanlon claimed this was to counteract the giant voting population centres around Brisbane. However, most people
John Howard
saw
was
it as
way more
gerrymandering
hard
to
right in
down
his
the
early
Labour
leadership. He also said
Party.
Australia
Following
was
the
leading
Labour
in too many
Party in
Asians.
1957,
Oh
Fraser
dear,
was
oh
elected
dear.
by the Country Party.
Like,
This allowed the
Howard is,
coalition
in my
to
opinion, one of the most
continuously win elections
overrated
throughout
prime
the
ministers.
60s,
There's
70s.
people really
In
like him.
1968, the Country Party
I
leadership
think he
would
was
be
this
taken
great
over
prime
by
minister,
one of
but
the most
I generally think he
premiers
just
in
won
Australian
by
history,
pot luck in the
Jovi
situation. He was
Peterson.
dealt really good
Under his
cards,
reign, the Yeki
and as a result, people seem to think he was better than he
Queensland
actually
became a
was. But
rogue state,
we'll get to that when we
opposing
cover
social
Howard
reform
next
and
week.
increasingly using the police to crack down on protests. This led the Queensland Liberal Party to question their support for the
Oh, yeah, that's
coalition.
right. So there's like this link thing between the Labour and the unions. Well, to be honest, they have that here, but I guess it's not quite as big a deal as it is in the UK.
Renamed the Country Party to the National Party.
So yeah, that's right. If anyone gets away from the legacy of Joe, the Nationals have to remember that their literal party name is derived because of Joe.
Enough for Nicky Peterson and would end the coalition. However, by this point it was too late, and following the election of 1983, Nicky Peterson was eventually successful in governing in his own right, winning a majority of seats for the National Party. The result of the 1983 election had left Nicky Peterson extremely ambitious, and he soon turned his attention to federal politics. A campaign called Joe for Canberra would soon be spawned, which sought not only to get Nicky Peterson into federal government, but also get him made Prime Minister. To Joe and his supporters, Canberra was full of socialists, hell-bent on destroying the Australian way of life, and only Joe...
Yeah, we keep hearing that all the time.
...values. Nicky Peterson would begin by taking all 12 of the Queensland Nationals federal candidates out of the coalition and would put pressure on other national branches to do the same. Nicky Peterson planned to use the same strategy he had employed in 1983 and would have the Nationals run against Labor and Liberal in urban seats with hopes of forming a federal Nationals government that he would lead. This put pressure on federal Nationals leader...
Yeah, I've got the right photo this time. I've got the right photo. See, it wasn't in colour, which annoyed me.
Would refuse to join the
See, like there's colour video of him, but not colour images. I don't know.
Joe for Canberra would
Actually, I guess I could have snipped his head out of that photo from Getty. Was it Getty Images? I forget.
Proposal of a flat tax rate, which also saw rich...
I don't understand. People are really obsessed with Flo. Like every time she appeared up on screen, it was like, "Oh look, it's Flo." I'm like, I didn't realise his wife was that big a deal.
Unlike Queensland, Federal Australia did not have...
Joe was already 76 already, but so yeah, I had no idea what he was expecting to do if he got elected. Like he was literally at retirement age, and yet he was trying to become Prime Minister. Like what?
Dissolution election for the 11th of July 1987. The reason for a double dissolution
Like he'd been
election was
Premier
the
since the
introduction of
60s in
Australian
Queensland.
card, a national identification card for all Australians, which hoped to amalgamate all other forms of
Yeah, they
ID
tell me
into
about that.
Australian
Apparently, she
ID
made really good
with a
scones.
card.
Then some people literally said they voted for Joe because they liked Flo's scones. I'm like, I'm sorry, can I become Prime Minister by having a wife with good scone making skills? Okay, take that note, bachelors.
And thus was unable to nominate for a seat. Without a leader, the Joe for Canberra campaign movement would soon collapse. Some elements of the Nationals would keep the slogan, while others tried to run the idea of Sinclair for Prime Minister. Meanwhile, others would join back up with the Liberals. The result of this was a completely disorganised Nationals campaign in the lead up to the election. The Nationals weren't the only ones caught off guard. The Liberals too were not expecting such an early election, and thus would struggle to put forward an electoral agenda. During the campaign, the Liberals would miscalculate their tax cut proposals by almost $1 billion, and combined with the mass disunity, the Liberals looked completely unprepared to govern. Howard would attempt to get the better of Hawke in the leadership debates. However,
There's the
Hawke,
parody clip
like
again.
his previous performance, refused to debate Howard. And the winner was, for the first time in Australian history, Labor had won 3 elections.
Is it
in a
crazy to
row
think Labor had
with
never won
4
3 elections below in the entire
most
history?
any
They'd
Labor government in
never
Australian
won 3
history.
elections. They've done it all the time in the
Labor's
States.
biggest
They've just
win
never
for
done it
Queensland, they
federally.
picked up 4 seats of the fractured coalition. Despite Labor's rather low two-party preferred result, the party was successful in winning over
Joe was
suburban
arresting
voters,
journalists and media
terrified
personalities. What it was
prospects of
called.
the
See John Valor.
government.
I want to talk
John
about that at the
Howard
end of the
had
video.
next
I've
left
got
by
to
the Joe
make a
for
statement. I was going to make it at
campaign.
the start of the video,
Liberals
but I'll
and
make it at the
Nationals
end.
won 43 and 19 seats respectively. Howard would not hold back on attacking Nicky Peterson for his dumb political stunt.
We are about to enter our third century as a nation, and whatever differences that divide us...
Yeah, I had a lot more
politically are
footage of people
important
talking in
differences,
this
and
in
they
the
will
early part of the
remain
season, the later
important
part.
differences. Those things that
We do have some
unite us as
vocal
Australians
footage
are
in
much
the
greater and more
2019
enduring
election
than
we're working
those
on.
things
I'll tell you
that
about that
divide.
at the end.
The Joe for Canberra campaign would be the beginning of the end for Nicky Peterson and his Queensland Nationals. Facing a corruption investigation in his home state, Nicky Peterson would soon be deposed as leader of the Nationals, and the party would later be wiped out in the 1989 state election by the Labor Party under Wayne Goss, who would immediately dismantle the 1949 Electoral Districts Act. This ended the Nationals' electoral advantage, and since 1989, the coalition has only ever won one
People
election
challenged me
in
on that, and I
Queensland
pointed
in
out that they
2012.
didn't actually win in
To some Labor,
1995.
this was
They
payback
won
for
the
Nicky
by-election
Peterson's
shortly
role in the
afterwards. That's how they went to
1975
power.
dismissal of the Whitlam government. On On an interesting note,
I'm not sure
today,
how
this
to
is the last
understand
federal
Labour
election
parties. They
which
seem to be a
independents
left
elected,
social
with
democratic
all
party
members
and
of the
right
House coming from one of the
right
three
of
main
socialist parties.
parties.
So a Labour
Walker
Party
made
is
Labour Party
basically a
history by
party
throwing its
created
veto
by
as Prime Minister
unions
and
to have a
eventually
political
criticism of
representation in
With a
government.
comfortable majority in the
So they're
House,
basically a
Walker
union
soon
party,
was the
that's it.
challenge yet.
The difference between
Died,
them and
come back
socialists
next time,
is
the
unions
election
have a
of
relationship with
1990.
industry, socialists wants to overturn industry. That's sort of the difference between the two.
Turn the TV on,
Oh no,
you
no,
wanna
no.
see me talking on the news, I know the way.
I regret this
Get down to
decision.
the booth 'cause voting is
I can't
free.
sing, I
All
can't.
I
Oh
wanna get is
god,
your
god.
first choice running in the 90s.
Why did I
It's a new
do
way you
this?
like to be. Why just
Oh
running
god,
in
this
the
is terrible.
90s?
How many people even watch Initial D to even get this meme?
We are
Oh,
running in the
jeez.
90s. It's a new way to
Ugh.
see. Why just running in the 90s?
Oh god,
Yes, I want
god,
your vote.
god,
Yes, I
oh
wanna
god.
win.
Oh, yes. And if you guys wondering why I never did sing after this one, it's because of this one. Oh, that was terrible. And we're done, oh thank
The
god.
War in the beginning of things. The 90s
Oh,
was a
dear.
transition time between the old ways of doing things and the new. In Australia, under three-term Prime Minister Bob Hawke, was trying to set up Australia to make most of this new era. Since winning
They're sending
his
some
largest
weird
majority yet,
recommendations.
Hawke would continue governing Australia throughout the remainder of the 80s. However, times are changing, and so are Hawke's policies.
Yeah, some of you guys are saying, stating facts that I mentioned in my other later videos. I'm like, are you guys just citing my later videos and like trying to prove that, like, show that you know stuff that I don't by using my own sources?
Along with the changes in governing, Hawke would also see Parliament move out.
The 90s was probably the low-key worst decade, like in Australian history or world history.
May 1988, to commemorate not only the opening of the first federal parliament on the 9th of May 1901, but also the 200th year anniversary of the first fleet arriving in Australia in 1788. However, the Hawke government would not fund the first fleet recreation ceremony over fears of offending Indigenous Australians. Despite the ceremonies and celebrations, Australia was on the verge of its worst recession since the Great Depression as stocks crashed and unemployment began to
In
rise
terms of
sharply.
politics and culture,
This was brought about
yeah, I
by
guess so, because it was obviously
the
it was the adoption of neoliberalism by left-wing parties. It was one of the issues. It's where basically the right dominated so much in the 80s that the left just gave up being left-wing economic and moved to centralist economics, and they kind of haven't bothered to move back since, and leaves in a situation where a lot of governments around the world only have right-wing parties. That's it.
Years of Labour rule. However, first the Liberals needed to clean up their act following the disaster that was the 1987 election. In an attempt to show party unity, Liberal leader John Howard would bring back former leader Andrew Peacock as his deputy.
Yeah, see, I couldn't find good photos of Andrew Peacock. Like, the footage is fine. I was always tempted to take a screenshot from the video, but video screenshots is quite blurry, and the only reason they don't look blurry when you watch them is because they're in continuous motion.
Were also ousting their leader. Ian Sinclair was largely seen as a poor leader after failing to stop the coalition's dissolution from the ill-fated Joe for Canberra campaign.
You can run.
Along with this,
Oh, wait, I shouldn't be
Australian
singing,
generation
because I'm
change
terrible
was
at it,
underway,
apparently.
and would elect Charles Blunt as the new leader. Together, Peacock and Blunt would reform the coalition. and would attempt to
Blunt's like that
rebuild
leader you
Coffin,
forget about, because
but
he got
largely abandoned them
he
in
got
the last election.
appointed leader and then
The election
immediately
result
lost his
was
seat.
March, the coalition began to eye off Victoria, whose state Labor government under John Cain Jr. was deeply unpopular.
It's crazy to think of Victoria as a really red state these days, when it used to be a really blue state back in the day.
However, in reality, both parties were deeply unpopular, and this led a lot of Australians to look
NGL
towards third
Hawke was
parties.
kind of... Oh,
Hoping to capture these
so I'm not sure if I ever told you guys, I'm actually friends with Janine Haynes' grandson. I've actually been round her place a few times, although she passed away 15 years ago. My friend got her house when he turned 18, and was living in it for a while. So I've been through Janine's house, Janine Haynes' house, and had a look at some of her Senate books that obviously she would have been keeping when she was a senator. So if you guys are curious, I do know a famous politician quite well. Well, not her personally, but I know her family quite well.
Pushing for more environmental policies.
Victoria also had gerrymandering problems like SA and Queensland due to Liberal rule. Okay, I always thought the Liberal rule was caused by the DLP, which was at its strongest in Victoria. Okay, yeah, you just mentioned that. Sorry.
Eventually, after days of counting, Bob Hawke and Labor would emerge victorious, for a historic fourth time in a row, with a net loss of
She the
8
first women
seats
female
to hold
politician in
78.
Australian politics.
This surprisingly
She was the first one to become party leader, D-gaming. The first female elected was Enid Lyons, the former wife of Prime Minister Joseph Lyons back in 1940, but you'll have to go back and watch that video. So to say, all these videos are available on YouTube, and you guys can watch them without me talking over them. This basically is, again, just me just doing a commentary on the videos and talking about how I made them and some of the fun stuff, as well as answering your questions. I love that Red Arrow PNG that I just found one day online after she's literally all these videos. What's funny is, whenever you Google search Arrow, you immediately get like links to the TV series. What do guys people think of Andrew Peacock? Because he was always like looked like a decent Liberal leader that just never quite got the chance. But I'd probably prefer he became Prime Minister as opposed to John Howard.
With the Greens getting there first. The Democrats had also seen a massive increase to their lower house vote. However, Haynes would be unsuccessful in winning Kingston, and thus would no longer lead the Democrats. Despite Haynes' loss,
do you think Hawke should have let Keating run in this election? No, I don't possibly.
Parliament in over 45 years. Despite holding on to power, Hawke had lost his luster, and with the recession getting worse, Hawke would soon have to deal with challenges.
I don't know, like,
from the opposition.
I think Keating wasn't a very good Prime Minister either. Like, Hawke at least had the presentability.
1993 would mark the end of the Cold War, with the collapse of the USSR.
But I'm not sure if Hawke would have won 93. It was Keating's sort of aggressive attacking style that allowed him to win.
Fourth term in power. However, this time they would not be led by Bob Hawke, but by a new figure who would carry the legacy of a figure most people had forgotten. With a potential fifth win on the horizon, this new figure would be sure to do things slowly.
I always... Sorry, it's just a really bad joke. Wow, I forgot how slow down I... Oh dear.
Despite winning an unbelievable fourth term in office,
Hot take anthem used by Russia in the 90s is better than the current one. I like the current one. I'm sorry, but the Soviet Union anthem is now obviously the Russian anthem. It's like one of the greatest meme songs these days.
Hawke had grown close to several major business elites, and to some, he was losing his touch with the regular working class Australians, which the Labour Party was supposed to represent.
I think it is.
In 1998, Hawke would be approached by his treasurer and close ally, Paul Keating, who pressured Hawke to step down and give him the leadership position.
Like this, I stopped using regular pop songs and started playing Jurassic Park's theme.
Move dated back to 1983.
As the background music.
And Hawke had promised Keating a future leadership position in return for him deposing then-leader Bill Hayden. Hawke would reluctantly agree to the deal, which would take place at Kirribilli House, the PM's main Sydney residence, in front of ACTU Secretary Bill Keltley and businessman Sir Peter Albers, who would act as witnesses.
Businessmen? Why would you bring businessmen into Kirribilli House when you can bring in QAnon members?
Keating would take the role of deputy leader off the retiring line.
That's a joke aimed at modern day politics, by the way.
The party through the now-biting 1990 election. However, following the election, the two's relation would begin to deteriorate. With Hawke not indicating that he would resign, Keating began to become frustrated and would vent his frustration in a provocative speech in front of the National Press Gallery. This speech led Hawke to rescind the deal, and in response,
I tried to
Keating
find it, but I couldn't
the
find the
cabinet
speech.
to challenge Hawke for the leadership. This move would fail with 60% of the Labour Party supporting Hawke.
Good, John Metzer got it.
As a result, Keating would remain on the backbench of Parliament, where he considered leaving Canberra for good. Despite holding on to power, Hawke had been wounded by the challenge, and his personal approval rating would drop along with his party's. With the Labour Party in trouble, the coalition's new leader would bring forward an ambitious agenda. With Andrew Peacock's resignation, the Liberal Party would go over to John Robert Hewson.
I actually follow him on Twitter. He's sort of like Turnbull, basically. He used to be a Liberal Party member and now realises that he doesn't like his party anymore.
It only entered Parliament in the 1987 election.
The Lang-Keating relationship is probably one of those random stories I've ever heard in political history.
Joined by Tim Fisher,
it's interesting,
after Charles Blunt's surprise loss,
he just wanted to find he was very inspired by his leadership during the Great Depression and sought him out for political advice.
This 650-page economic policy planned to drastically reform the Australian economy to bring it more in line with the economy models of the UK and US. In
I guess
late
that'd be the same as me
1991, Houston would present this policy
forming a
in
relationship
Parliament,
with
which would
Whitlam or
catch Hawke
someone.
off guard,
Like
who didn't know how to
I
respond
was
to it.
old enough to
This
have
blunder
met
would be the final
Whitlam
nail
as
in
an
the coffin
adult,
for Hawke's
and I would
leadership.
have possibly got
And
the
his
chance
allies
to know him
began
in the
to
last few
lose
years of
faith
his
in his
life.
ability to debate.
But also, I didn't know who
With
Whitlam
this,
was
Keating
until
would
after he
reach
died.
again, and this time would be successful in getting the votes to depose
I've
Hawke,
really only
and thus,
become really
Hawke's
politically
tenure as
active
Australia's
in the
second
last
longest-serving
5
Prime Minister
years.
would come
So
to
before
an end.
2015, I knew
Hawke
who the
would
Prime
soon
Minister
resign the
was.
following year in 1992,
But like I wasn't
after
super
12
like
years
passionate about who
in
I
government,
wanted
of
to
which most
vote
of it
for,
was
who
as
I
Prime
wanted didn't want to
Minister.
vote for.
The following by-election for his seat of Wills would be crazy when 22 different candidates, the most for a single seat, would battle it out, with independent Phil Cleary besting Labor's Bill Carter-Mittis to become the seat's new member. Now down a seat, Keating would lead the Labor Party into its next election. Now who exactly is Paul Keating? Born in 1944 Darlinghurst, Sydney, Keating
That's
would
not what
grow up in a
Darlinghurst looked like in the
working-class background
60s.
and would leave high school early to work as a pay clerk. He soon joined the New South Wales Labor Party.
Crazy
in
that Joe
1966.
Joe Biden's older than
He
Bill
had a
Clinton.
19-year-old
Like
Jack
he is
Didn't
a
expect him to
dinosaur, and he
media.
probably shouldn't be the
Keating would form
president.
a close relationship
And
with
same
the
deal
Premier,
needs to
and
Trump.
in 1971 would help in getting him re-admitted into the Labor Party shortly before his death in 1975. In 1969,
Problem with US
Keating would be
politics
elected
is
to
all
the
their
seat of
young politicians
Blackflag
are downright
at the age of
crazy.
25, and would quickly work his way up the ranks until finally becoming Prime Minister. As Lang's successor, Keating took the former Premier's aggressive debating style with him into Parliament, frequently insulting the coalition in debates. One of his most famous deliveries came in 1992, when Hewson, confident in his electoral chances, would challenge Keating to call the election, asking him why he hadn't called it yet, to which Keating responded,
I want to do you slowly.
Despite being best
People
remembered
love
for
that
his
line.
quotes, Keating would also bring forward major policy changes. He would
Most
attempt to
politicians
strengthen
I really
Australia's
respect
ties
are
with
already
its local
dead.
neighbours by playing a key
I think there
role
are
in
good
the
politicians
establishment
today.
of the
Like
Asian Pacific Economic
maybe it's because I'm a
Cooperation
Labour supporter, but I do think Anthony
He would also
Albanese is a great guy.
controversially
Like I
established
also,
mandatory
if you
detention
watch
for
my video
asylum
where I interviewed Steve
This policy
Georgianis, I
would
think
detain
he's a
non-citizens
pretty
not
good
holding a
fellow.
valid
I have a
visa
few issues with
or
him, but
arriving into Australia
I generally think
illegally.
that both of them
However,
are
arguably his greatest policy
people
agenda was the
passionate about
mandatory
helping Australians out for the
superannuation
better.
scheme. This policy forced all working Australians to put aside a small portion of their wages into a private industry
Here from
superannuation fund to accumulate
D-Gaming,
wealth
your
that could then be
subscribers
accessed
coming into my
upon their
live stream now.
retirement.
That's
This was done to take pressure off the nation's
that's
pension
nice.
system,
Thank
which
you
was
for the
soon to be
extra support.
overloaded with a large number of baby boomers approaching retirement age within the next 20 years. However, despite Keating's new
Hey,
policy
so,
agenda, Labour was seriously
everyone
trying
else
to
get on
hide
it.
Hewson
I want
from
your
the
subscribers
coalition
watching this
polls.
live stream as well now.
Behind closed doors, many figures told Keating that his job should be to save as many Labour seats as he could from their inevitable defeat. In response, Keating would run his campaign on aggressively attacking...
I feel like I used this
despite
one clip of him
vaccine,
just waving his arm around like
specifically
3 times in this
tax.
video.
The Goods and Service Tax, or GST, was a proposed 15% tax that would be placed on all non-essential goods.
Now, I'm
in
pretty
return
sure
for a massive
GSTs are quite
reduction in
common
income
around the
tax
world.
rates. Keating would call this tax
To be honest, I'm not
deadline
actually a
when
big
the economy
I'm
still
not actually a big
recovering from
fan
its
of
recession in
GSTs.
recent
I find
memory.
them
These attacks
if a
by Keating
strong
were
economy is
somewhat
yeah,
hypocritical.
now wait
Keating
again.
himself flattered
If a
the idea
GST is
of
meant to
GST during
if
his time as
if a strong
Treasurer.
economy is an economy where
Regardless, the
people
election
are
was
buying
called for
stuff,
the 13th of March,
why are we
1993,
taxing them buying
and Keating
stuff?
had made it a
I've
referendum
never
on
understood
GST,
that.
and it would be up to Hewson to sell it to the public. 10 days before the election, Hewson would appear at a TV
So like,
interview with
and
reporter
also
Mike Wilson,
they've shown that
who asked him,
GST affects poor people more because poor people buy more stuff than rich people. A lot of rich people just stockpile their money. Poor people are constantly buying, spending everything they get. So it ends up being a tax on the poor. That's why I don't like GST. So Tommy Douglas is often said to be the best Canadian Premier. Do you think any Australian PM stands out as the best? Australian Premier. Out of the current Premiers, the best one currently, it's very difficult to say who I think the best PM is. Possibly Andrew Barr, although no, he's a chief minister. I'd probably it's difficult. Like I couldn't say possibly Daniel Andrews, but he's also got
Hewson's
flaws.
rambling
Also,
non-answer would
he's
soon
also
be
a
picked
super
up by
controversial
satirists
figure to
and
put
cartoonists
forward.
who make fun of the opposition leader and his policy.
And if you've been
However,
ever,
Hewson
like,
just
I don't
shrugged
know
off
a
and
lot of
got
historical
confident with
premiers.
polls
You could ask me about
overwhelmingly
South
showing
Australian
Hawke's
ones, in which
victory.
I'd probably say Jay Weatherall,
And
but
the winner was-
again, I don't know many,
One
I
of
don't
the
know
most
more
prized upsets in
historical
Australian history,
ones.
Keating had won. Not only that, Keating had even picked up 2 seats, along with a 1.54% swing in the two-party preferred vote to win a total of 80 seats.
German politics is weird.
This
Yes,
was the first time
yes,
an
German
incumbent party
politics
had
is very
increased their
weird.
two-party preferred result
Since
I don't like. You don't actually directly
Keating
elect
summed
your
up his win in the
chancellor,
first
do
line
you?
of his
It's
victory
actually
speech when
the
he
German
said,
chancellor's elected via like the elected members or something. It's a bit like how we elect the governor general. He's appointed by the prime minister, not
weaponizing the public's
not
opinion
elected
against the coalition's
by the
economic
people.
reforms, with a lot of blame being focused on Houston's blunder in the birthday cake interview. Houston had lost 4 seats thanks to a seat reduction and had only won 48.56% of the two-party preferred. To some, Houston had been too ambitious in his policy agenda and had scared the public away from the coalition. Houston would remain as leader despite losing the unlosable election, but his position would be very shaky. Along with the surprise upset, this election would also be known for a few other things. This would be current father of the House Kevin Andrews' first election.
He
after
lost
winning the
pre-selection.
1991
He won't be
by-election.
he won't
This
be
had also been the
sitting
first
in the
election to be covered by Anthony
he won't be
Green, the ABC's
sitting in the
famous
next government.
political commentator, who's appeared in all subsequent elections to give
So
his
yep,
expertise to
so
the
who
public,
was the one who
and
mentioned
he is
Anthony
definitely
Green
right
last
on this
time?
channel.
So as I say,
This election
Anthony
also
Green is
see a
definitely someone
strange
I
occurrence in the newly
I
formed
inspire to be
Brisbane
like.
Dixon.
Part of me
One the
always jokes that I
candidates
should take
died
over his
shortly
job
before
at the
election.
next when
This
he
led to the
retires.
seat's election being delayed until the 17th of April. Making
You think I could be a good
1993
Anthony Green,
the
just
only
stand up in
election
front of a
outside the
projection
1901
board and just
election to have
talk
voting
about
occur on
random
2 different
statistics all
days.
day long?
Now with his own mandate to govern, Keating would lead Labor into its 5th term as government. However, had Keating brought about a resurgence of the party, or had he just seen a fluke rise before a major fall? Come back next time for the
Oh,
election
Mike
of
Rand's here.
1996.
Who will be father of house after Kevin Andrews? Because Snowden
1996
is
would mark
also
the
going to
first
be
election
that's
I would
one.
be alive
Is it going to be
for.
Russell
It would also
Broadbent?
mark Labour's
Could
30th
be.
year
It
in
could also be
power.
Bob
This was
Catter, I
unheard of
believe.
for a party which notoriously only ever held power for no more than 3
I have to double
years
check.
before being defeated. However, despite their electoral success, times were changing. And the public were
There's not
beginning to
too many
feel
politicians
tired of the
left from the
Labour
90s.
government. Was the party doomed for defeat, or could Keating pull off another?
I believe
incredible
I
election
know my state member Tom Cruzentonis is he was elected in 1996, so he's one of the few parliamentarians from the 90s in the state level. Federal level, I'm not too sure about. Actually, the current member of the NT who's
After
resigned in this
defying
election
the
is
polls
also
and winning Labour a 5th
oh yeah,
term in
Snowden.
power,
Yeah, that's right.
Keating was emboldened to push forward with his political agenda.
He
Keating
was
would take a much
he's
more
actually
right-wing
older than
stance
Kevin
to the
Andrews, but he
economy,
lost the election and
killing off
came
several
back in,
major
so that technically
states in government
debunks
held
his
companies
or like
such as Qantas
reduces
and
his
Commonwealth Bank.
means he's no longer
It
a
would
father
also be
house
the
because he needs
first
to be
step to finally
continuous.
breaking the nation away from British rule, establishing a Republic Advisory Committee to establish the
When we
groundwork
changed
for an Australian
math
republic.
topic to statistics
While Keating
recently,
began the process
our
of
quickly went from
reorganisation,
F to
he would
A's.
have to deal with multiple
Interesting.
controversies in Canberra.
Oh, okay, so
The
grading.
first bit of
Okay, it's
rise
like
when sport
how are you getting
minister
F's and A's
Ross
mixed up?
was
Like,
forced to
oh,
resign
okay.
following a scandal involving the distribution of sports scholarships to clubs in marginal seats.
I basically mentioned this just
Himself
because of the
also
sports
got
rorts
fired due to
today.
his relationship with Indonesian President Suharto, who was under fire for his.
That's his
political
name. He doesn't have a last name.
theories.
I always find that kind of
However,
strange.
Despite King's image issue, the Labour Party continued to remain up in the polls following the 1993 election, and this was due to infighting within the coalition. Despite losing the unlosable election, Houston vowed to remain as leader of the Liberal Party, defeating a challenge to his leadership led by Formula leader John
When it's
Howard.
continuous, it does.
However,
It
as time
count
went
if you
on,
change
Houston found
seats
his
because
leadership being
Robin
undermined
held
both
McMillan before
inside
it was
by major
abolished.
coalition figures
And yeah, so if you
outside by immediately
remain sitting in
contiguous
Parliament,
fellow
it
politicians.
counts. But if you lose,
Eventually,
if you
Houston's
get
votes
knocked out
would
of
catch
Parliament
up
and
to
come
him,
back
and in 1994, he would
a
be
year
defeated.
later or so in a
The leadership
by-election or
led
3 years
by
later in an
Alexander
election,
Downer.
that
Born
doesn't
in
count.
Adelaide, Downer had come from a
Why did
major
Houston not
political
like
dynasty,
Howard?
with his grandfather, Sir John Downer, being the state's 16th
Did I say that?
premier. Downer had been an advisor to both Fraser and Peacock before entering Parliament in 1984.
I don't know. Like
During his
I've never seen Houston's
Quickly
comments
working
on.
his way into the Shadow Cabinet, Downer
on,
became the Shadow
Howard.
Treasurer before defeating Houston to become the first South
Wouldn't
Australian
surprise
to be
me.
one of the two main parties. With an initial high approval rating, he looked on track to defeat Keating come 1996. Is this it? Is my state finally going to get a Prime Minister after 95 years? No. Soon after assuming
Yep,
the leadership
South
position,
Australia
Downer
remains
would
the
soon be
only
faced with
state in the
blunder after
Commonwealth
blunder.
never to have a Prime
These
Minister
blunders
represented.
included speech gaffes, kicking Houston off the Shadow
Do you think
Cabinet,
that Joyce
as well as
will
firms
win the
keeping
Nationals
the
leadership
Party
spiel
message on
tomorrow?
public
Wait,
movement.
so there is a spiel happening
Eventually,
tomorrow?
he
I
would
didn't.
catch up
I know there've been
in early
rumours about it, but it had
1995,
actually finally been
less than 1
called.
year after taking the leadership, Downer would resign, becoming
The
the
fish
first
that jumps
major
off
party
the
leader
hook
not to contest
for
an
you.
election
Is that a line that
since John
Houston
Layton
said
in
about Howard?
1931. With no one else to lead the party, John Howard would yet again emerge to take on the role 6 years after originally being deposed. The Australian
if there is
Democrats
one,
wouldn't be
okay.
faring much better when it came to party
It's difficult
leaders.
because I think
Since Haynes'
Barnaby Joyce
departure from
tried
Canberra
before
in
but failed.
1990, a party had gone
Like,
through
I
3
really
years,
don't like
which now
Michael
led by
McCormack. I
Queenslander
think
Cheryl
he's a
Blount.
terrible.
The party seriously underperformed in the
he's a
1993
terrible
election,
leader,
losing
but
over half their votes in the Senate.
I don't
greatly
trust the
weakening
Nationals to
party.
see that as
The
well.
party was also beginning to break down, with different state branches unsure on what a centralist party should represent. With polls showing Labour out in front, the now Howard-led coalition knew that if they wanted to win, they needed to prevent the repeat.
There's also so few numbers, so it's kind of can go anywhere. Not sure it's confirmed, but the 1996 election had the highest number of independents elected in a single election. Hanson, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there were 5 independents elected in the 2010 election as well.
Ambitious fight-back policy scared Australians back in 1993.
I feel like the Nats Mods like the MP for Gippsland and MP for Lyme went back Joyce. Yeah, I feel like the problem with Joyce is he's yesterday's news to a lot of them, and I feel like they need a new leader to take on Joyce's
This
role.
would soon be on display in the Canberra by-election.
So if they all
With the
unite
resigning
behind the
Ross
one
Kelly
figure,
being
they could
replaced by the Liberals'
take down
Brendan
McCormack.
Smith, despite Canberra being a safe Labor seat. Wait, you spell Smith with a Y? Labor's poor result would also be seen nationwide, but the coalition would win and
just
control every
insulting,
state and territory
coalition
government
members'
bar New
names.
South Wales.
Sworn for Nationalist leadership. The Nationals won't like me. I can tell you that now. I quite actively despise the Nationals right now because of a certain action a deputy premier took earlier this month.
The 2nd of March,
Brendan
1996,
Smith for leadership.
and the winner was John Howard and the
You should change your name
coalition
to
won whopping
Mike
94
Ran,
seats.
MYKE.
Again at 29. This was also seen in the two-party preferred, with a swing of over 5% giving the coalition 54.
Why did Hanson win
63
Oxley
seats.
so massively
The
in a
coalition's strategy of pushing a strong unified
disowned
party,
as a
the
disowned
moderated agenda
candidate?
had worked. They were
Wait,
now
she
back
won by a
in
huge
government after
margin?
13 years
I
in
thought she just won
opposition, the
comfortably.
longest for any federal non-Labor party.
I don't know, like
While
obviously
Labor did win back
I
to
suspect it's
Canberra
also because
and
of
Wales,
Queensland.
Labour at
Queensland
best
is
was a
very
total
culturally
disaster,
conservative.
with the party losing 31 seats to hold a mere 49.
Mark Vaile is the
To many,
chancellor of my
Keating was the main
university.
reason
How
for
sad
the
is
downfall.
that?
The man had never been particularly popular.
Yeah, I can
even back to
imagine.
his unexpected win in
That guy called a
1993.
secret police on a
He had also
YouTuber.
become too
Yeah,
focused on
we'll
small-scale
talk about that
issues
a bit later.
and had lost a lot of
19.3%
focus on the bigger
maybe she just won
economic
independence. Like
issues that were still
a lot of
plaguing the nation,
Queensland
both
likes to
in the
just
recession.
rebel, and if they
During
had a
that
candidate
election,
who rebelled against their own
Keating
party,
resigned after almost
you know,
30
is
years in Canberra.
anti-Labor,
He would hang
anti-liberal.
around in
I guess
Canberra using the old East
they just
German
attracted
embassy
her.
as a house
Also,
while his daughters finished high
sometimes
school,
these
but would soon move
more,
back to Sydney for a
I'll
job
use
in
the
the
word
private sector.
racist candidates.
Despite leaving
Sometimes initially get a lot of
Keating
popularity from
remained a
people who
figure,
feel like they're plain
frequently
speaking,
criticising future
is
governments,
how they
both
use an
Liberal and
Australian
Labor, for
term.
their shortcomings. The Democrats had been successful in recapturing some of their lost support, winning just over 10% of the vote in the Senate. Meanwhile, the Greens
It's
Party
interesting that it was
also
that
seen
big.
their
That's
votes
kind of
increase,
surprising.
with Bob
Morrison
Brown
should
of
call
the
an inquiry
Tasmanian
into the
Greens
communist
making his foray
activities
into federal
and arrest all
politics
ALP.
after a decade in
Oh,
Tasmanian
God.
Parliament. However, eyes would soon turn to Bill Hayden's seat of Oxley, which had just been won by independent Pauline Hanson. Hanson had originally been the Liberals' pick for the seat, but the party soon disowned her when her views on immigration became known. Despite this, Hanson
What do you
would
think
win the
about
seat off
Bob
Labor
Katter?
and would soon make headlines
It's
in
spelled
an
with a
amazing
K.
speech on the floor of Parliament when she said,
I definitely feel like he's kind of getting a bit better these days, because I think like beforehand he was just a massive anti-Labor guy, but I think he's also realising that the Liberals aren't much better. And I'm hoping that if he does come up to a hung parliament, that he'll support Labor, but it's unknown.
1984 and 1995.
Yeah, I had to put the disclaimer because as soon as you're playing Hanson clips, you're never sure what people think your channel's going to be like.
Religion, form ghettos, and do not assimilate.
Hanson would soon establish her own party known as One Nation, which promoted a very strong anti-immigration and anti-multiculturalism view.
Notice how anti-immigration rhetoric changes based on trends. Used to be anti-Asian, not anti-Muslim.
Despite
Yeah.
winning the election, John Howard would have to deal with a very different political climate than that of 1987, when he first tried to become Prime Minister. Would he be able to cope? Come back next time
for
for
the election of
1998.
1998. Alright, so that is the last of the videos we'll be showing today. It is just gone past 9 o'clock. So just to cover a few things before we finish up. So what I was going to say at the start of the video is, as you guys might be well aware, in New South Wales, Friendly Geordie's producer had what's akin to basically anti-terrorist police called on him because he was basically accused of stalking the Deputy Premier. Regardless of what happened, I do not believe the actions taken by the Deputy Premier are justified, and I do massively condemn what he did. And I think if he had had any decency, he'd resign from Parliament right now, because what he has done is a gross overstep of power. I was tempted to make a video on it and comment on it myself, but I'm not the biggest one for uploading videos in every little news story, so I figure I'll just say it now that I stand with pretty much the rest of the Australian YouTube community in condemning the Deputy Premier's actions, and I believe he really should be kicked out of Parliament for what he's done. On to some more uplifting stories. So the good news is the other video I was working on for Xenosanctum, my other channel, that video is now done and will be uploaded. Tonight. Sorry. So I should be finally free to work on the 2019 election. Unfortunately, I've literally made absolutely no progress on the 2019 election since last week, since I was spending all my free time working on the Xenosanctum video. But now that's out of the way, I should be able to get to the 2019 election. So the question is, can I get the entire video recorded, edited, and published by this Sunday? The answer is I don't know. So it is possible that we might get to next week and the video is not ready. And if that is the case, I do apologize. But I will try. I will try to get the 2019 election out so I can show it at the end of the next video for you guys. So before I head off, I'm willing to take on a few last minute comments. I believe there was something I was meant to say as well, but I didn't. I might not have mentioned it. So if you guys have remind me of stuff I was supposed to talk about, that would be good. So let's see, will the police wait, someone will have the police called in by Rob Lucas. What have I done to Rob Lucas? Like, what have I said to Rob Lucas that we're going to call the police on me? Absolutely ridiculously, yeah, I agree with that. Where's the 2011 New South Wales state election video? Yeah, I'm not doing that one. That one is a shocker. The fact that New South Wales has gone that long with the coalition and still likes him, it's just like, ugh. So, I don't think I can even comment on the insanity of calling a secret police. Okay, they're not the secret police, but they're basically what's akin to an anti-terrorist squad. They're not actually an anti-terrorist squad. They're used for a few other things, but they're basically an anti-terrorist squad. You gotta do that one. No, I don't, because it's a state election. We love the coalition. They are so good privatising session epic. Alright, Mike Rand, I'm kicking you off the chat. Interview. It's because of 9 Fairfax dominates the news here and they love Gladys. Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case. Like, at least I have the advantage here that the advertiser isn't entirely blatant coalition bias. What's your opinion on the SA Liberals collapsing? I wouldn't say they're collapsing. I know that they've gone to minority government with the amount of ministers they've had to resign. But at least they are resigning. That at least shows they have at least some honour here. In New South Wales, they wouldn't resign. They would instead call everyone fake news and somehow get re-elected on a larger margin because voters are idiots for some reason. But I do also know about the party situation. Okay, Tommy Guy, you have no taste in women, so just get off the chat. Alright, this is getting a little carried away. So I think I'll have to stop the chat now. So I'll answer the last 2 questions. I'll answer anything more, alright? The banning of the evangelicals doing say liberal kind of sus. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Alright, the video's done. Okay, cool. Sorry, I won't read any more of the comments because I have to stop now. But thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you 8 p.m. next week, Sunday, for the second part of Season 3, and hopefully the preview of the 2019 election. Until then, I will say bye.